them Catholics at? Yeah. Yo, where them Catholics at? Man, what's the matter with these bishops?
And welcome back, everyone. It's another episode of the Catholic Convert Show. And today we've got a guest on the show. You guys probably know who he is. His name is John Kramer, and he is running the Lego Catholic Church Project. And I probably horribly described that. But if you don't know who he is, you soon will. I'm going to go ahead and welcome the man to the studio. John, how you doing, brother?
Not doing too bad. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
Oh, so the Lego Church Project, which is the official name, not the Lego Catholic Church, because there's only one true church. So there's no need to describe it as Catholic.
Right.
What on earth compelled you to say, let me take the most dangerous object to all fathers on the planet and turn them into something beautiful?
Oh, man. Where do I begin with this one? For 25 years, I've been building a giant cathedral of my own design using those fun bricks that send you to confession if you step on one.
Every time.
And I've come close to it myself. And basically what I do is try and do my own take on a church using everything off the top of my head. I'm not a trained architect. I didn't go to school to be an architect. And here I am. I'm building these giant creations. The Season 25 project is about 47 inches long by 25 inches wide, with a height to the tip of the bell tower at about 25 inches as well. And there's like a full interior with lights, minifigures, 2 working bells. And the reason behind it, the core of it is disability. I've got a mild form of cerebral palsy, so I'm showing no matter what challenge or disability you face, God can still use your talents. So this is a message that I live, a message that I share with those around me.
See, I like that. You know, Ed and I have talked about on the show plenty of times that there's so many people that are interested in figuring out their way of serving God. But you know, everybody wants this. I got to have the important job. I think Ed was like, I can do so much for the church. And his priest was like, cool, we'll use you in the food bank. And he's like, wait, not like that. But everyone has a unique gift, something specific to them. Ed is still figuring that out. He'll eventually get there.
Maybe
You've got this. I've got writing. There's so many other people that do wonderful artwork and video production, very charismatic speakers. And this is what yours just happens to be. But there's that added layer of, you know, bringing more awareness to people with disabilities and saying, you know, you can still do something that is beautiful. You can still do something that is meaningful. You can still do something that is in service of our Lord.
Yeah, and I think that's really the core of what I try and come across when I'm doing my work with the project. What the project allows me to do is to open doors to conversations, to bring up issues that a lot of people may not necessarily think about. And over the course of 25 years of doing this, I've run into all kinds of people. I've brought light to certain issues that are often overlooked. And with my own work, I try and make sure that people with disabilities have a voice in the church. Oftentimes we are overlooked, especially when those disabilities fall more into the area of invisible. The stuff that's not easily seen or noticed unless you really get to know someone. In my case, that is pretty much where I fit into. On one hand, people see me, they think that I'm relatively normal, and I'm about 95% independent. But I do have quirks, challenges, and limitations, especially like with the cerebral palsy. I've got issues with mobility and such, so I got to be very careful when I'm walking, especially in a church. I also have vision issues and audio issues with tinnitus. And if anyone's ever experienced that, that is a fate unlike anything else in this world. Combine it with visual snow, yes, makes for an interesting time.
Well, I can imagine. I've dealt with tinnitus for years. Loud noises in the military caused that one, but obviously not to the degree that other people have. So I'm not even trying to say, compare it. All that said, what types of things have you actually noticed? Because I have a very narrow view. I've only ever attended one Catholic parish in my entire life. It's the parish I attend now. And it might be that I just don't notice it. But what issues have you actually noticed and seen with individuals with disabilities in churches that go overlooked, or where it seems to that, like you mentioned, they don't have a voice? What have you personally witnessed as far as that?
What I've seen, especially when I dive into things on the internet, you run into a lot of horror stories. Parents with children who are possibly forced out because their child does not act in a normal way, especially like if you're dealing with autism issues. You've also had parents who are trying to get their children the sacraments, and someone may just make assumptions that that child may never be ready. For me personally, I think it just comes down to a mindset and an attitude. There's a lot of judgment that people will pass on anyone. I've certainly experienced that. There have been some parishes where I've visited where I wasn't exactly welcomed as much as I would like because of the fact that I'm a big guy. I make no bones about it. I'm a big guy. You see me walking, and a lot of people believe that my balance issues are because of the weight. And to a minor extent, that may be the case. But the other issue for me is I just have the neurological issues that make walking great distances a little bit more of a challenge. So I think a lot of the main issues I see are related to judgment assumptions on what disability is and what disability isn't. I've had people suggest that I just watch Mass from home, but the problem for me is that because of the sensory issues that I have, in order for me to be able to stay focused to a degree, I need to be at Mass in person. And that leads into one of the other bigger issues that I run into is the transportation aspect. I am fortunate that in 95% of my cases, I'm able to get a ride to Mass. But there's like almost no wiggle room for extra activities in the church that I can take part in unless I happen to know someone who's going, and most of the times I don't. But there are others that I've talked to, others that I've run into who don't have the same resources that I do. They don't have family in the church. They don't have friends in the church. And that gets become more of a problem as you get older, where you may be the only one still around for your family and you've got no contacts. You've got no connections. So a lot of people tend to get overlooked. And that's just one of the consistent things that keeps coming up when I'm giving talks and stuff, relates to the issue of transportation. I've been on quite a few shows over the years, and that seems to be the number one topic of discussion. And I think it just boils down to is that we just need to have a more open mindset as to how we can minister to those who often feel like they're overlooked. As someone with a disability, sometimes I feel like I'm overlooked because we don't do enough to talk about the importance of inclusion, allowing people to be welcome in the church where they're at. And it's not always about spending money on making adaptations to a building. It starts with the attitude. That's the biggest thing I run into, is that attitude. If we have a more welcoming mindset, everything else will flow from that.
I can see that. We have a couple of individuals at my parish who are, I would say, wheelchair bound. I don't know if they're always wheelchair bound because I only ever see them at Mass. So it could just be, hey, this is easier for me than squeezing in and out of it to go all the way down to the communion rail, so forth and whatever. But I have noticed that for the most part, people at my parish, and I have a fairly large parish. We've got about 2,800 families there. And most of the people, we all tend to click up with the people that we know best, obviously. Sitting in the same pews every Sunday or every holy day of obligation. Reminder, you've got one coming up this coming week. But I wouldn't say that people are ignored, but it's more like just kind of minding their own business of, hey, it's John, or hey, it's Pete, and it's, hey, Pete's here, that kind of thing. And it's not so much we're ignoring them. And obviously, if someone were to ask for assistance, they get it. We have that. But would you say that that's also the case sometimes, where it's not that people are being overlooked? It's more like just Pete. It's not guy in a wheelchair. It's not guy with disability. It's just Pete or John or Kay or Sally sometimes.
I think a little bit of both. I think sometimes if you see someone in a wheelchair, you may not necessarily be comfortable with approaching them because you may not know how to talk to them. I've run into certain situations with that. I tend to be more mindful of it because this is the world that I live in. We have a parishioner. We have a parishioner who sometimes visits us at the church, and I always go up to. I always make sure I go up to say hello to him if I've got a free moment. And we've got another lady who brings her daughter who's got cerebral palsy, and she's in a power chair. And I always make sure I go up to say hello to her and her mom, just to know that there are people that are looking out for them. I remember one time there was we were doing a late night mass, and I watched them go to their vehicle just to make sure that they were safe. So I think some people may not necessarily be comfortable because they don't know how to interact. And that's just a common thing. It's not necessarily they're trying to say, oh, that person's got something, I don't want to talk to them. They may be a little bit skittish because they're afraid of causing offense. And
that was going to be my next thing. Like, I don't want to walk up to a guy in a wheelchair and be like, hey, do you need my help? And he's like, get the heck away from me. I'm fine. Why do you assume I need help? And I'm like, crap, my bad.
Well, and some of us are fiercely independent. I know that I am.
Right.
And I think it kind of, each person, no matter what challenge they face, have their own way of dealing with things. Some are open to the idea of getting a helping hand. Some are just so headstrong that they want to do things on their own no matter what, because they are afraid that if they ask for help, they're showing some kind of weakness.
Yeah, I've certainly be pitied, which that's understandable.
But there are also those of us like myself who also have this empathy and understanding that just because someone's asking for help doesn't necessarily mean that they're in any kind of a weak-minded place. It's just they need a little extra hand, especially with some of the doors at the church. They've got those little weather strips that can be a little bit challenged to navigate if you don't get momentum. I know at our church,
the front doors at our church are like 20 feet high. Like, there's these giant, massive double doors that you have to swing open. So yeah, I can imagine stuff like that would be a nominal challenge.
Well, when I'm bringing the project over to my home parish, we enter in through the back way, which happens to have the ramp for the wheelchairs and stuff. We actually got rid of our stairs in the back section where the main parking lot is to make it easier for people to get inside. But still, there's that little nub there. And trying to move 80 pounds of Legos on a coffee cart, yeah, that can be very interesting.
80 pounds of Legos. How big is that thing? Holy crap.
As I said at the beginning, 47 inches long.
Oh, okay, that's that one. That's a lot of Legos to weigh 87 pounds.
Like 80
how many
pounds.
Legos? Okay, 80 pounds. How many Legos make up a pound? It's got to be a lot.
I would say, I think I've got close to 25,000 pieces in there, give or take.
Jeez.
I mean, you have to figure the floors alone, which have all this individual tile work of 1x1 rounds. I stopped counting at about 1,200 parts at that point. Plus, you've got the pews that are built in multiple pieces. You've got the pillars that are built in multiple pieces. You've got the roof, the giant cross that sits on top of the roof, which is the profile picture that I have has me holding a version of that. That weighs at least a couple pounds in its own right. And as I often say, it can survive a fall off a table. And yeah, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Honestly amazed I didn't break the concrete when it landed.
So when you create these churches, what are you doing with them? Are you donating them to different parishes, or are they being, I don't want to say sold, but taken as part of like a donation for the parish, or what?
What I do is first off, the build process starts mid-February, sometimes a couple weeks after the previous season is taken apart. And then what I'll do is once I finish the build, I will find parishes in the region that will allow me to come out to share my work in public, to allow people to see everything up close and personal. And sometimes the parishes will allow me to give a short presentation, usually with something related to my work, related to the mystery that I'm doing. And then from there, I'll go to the display portion where I'll actually sit, get to interact with people that come up to see what I'm doing, ask questions. Some parishes, like Assumption and Midland, will allow me to do a question and answer session with the adults and the kids. In fact, I'm probably, if you search my name up on YouTube, there's probably one from Gladwin that I did a couple of years ago, season 23, where I did just that, and I was asking a lot of questions on that. So once the final display happens, which is usually at my home parish here in Saginaw, Christ the Good Shepherd, usually around Advent through the Christmas season, then I bring it home and I take it apart, brick by brick.
That's got to hurt.
It is a bittersweet moment.
I would imagine.
It is bitter because it is the end of the season. It puts a finality to things, but it's also sweet because there's always that whisper of excitement looking forward to the next build. And the build process is a lot of challenge, but it's also a lot of fun because I'm testing the limits of the bricks and I'm testing the limits of my own anxieties. You have to figure.
I would add you're probably testing the limits of the calluses on your fingers.
There are days when I've worked on a section and my fingers will hurt for a couple days, especially when I'm doing teardown. Between either doing the teardown or the main part of the floors, the floors alone can take about 8 to 10 hours. And that's not counting the tile work for the aisles and stuff. That's just the main floor because you have to, it's a giant jigsaw puzzle because first off, you're trying to cover all the seams of the different base plates that I'm using. But at the same time, you're trying to figure out, do you have enough plates to cover the floor like you want it to? I've cut it a little close more than a few times.
Right. So I see that most of your designs, if not all of them, have been custom designs as you decided they should be. Have you ever tried to, I don't know, copy some grand cathedrals? Like I could imagine it would probably take 2 years to do like the cathedral in Cologne, Germany or something like that.
Well, the challenge of replicating something in brick, especially for the scale that I'm doing, because I'm doing this in a minifigure scale because I want people to see the details on the inside, and that ties to my ministry, but you'd need a lot more space than what I have. And the reason why I use the dimensions that I use for the project is so it can fit through my door. And it can also fit into most SUVs. In fact, one of the parishes I sometimes display at over in Bay City, Michigan, the priest from that parish will actually come out with his vehicle and take the project out. So it's kind of built like that by design because I want to be able to transport it. I want to be able to showcase what I'm doing. And so both adults and children can see the details on the inside. They can see the priest standing at the altar. They can see the tabernacle from all the way from the back doors of the church. They can see the church full of figures, especially the main floor. I haven't got enough figures to finish the balcony, but that will happen at some point. But they also
they love you at the Lego store.
Believe it or not, I've actually not been to the one. There's the one closest to me would be down in Troy, and that's still about an hour and a half drive. I get most of my parts off of the secondary market from a shop called Bricklink, and I've got like quite a few vendors that I do business with, and they love me around project time because I do get donations. I do get donations from people that want to help me out. And then so that a lot of that will go into buying the parts that I need for the upcoming season. Sometimes it's for new stuff that will go in. Other times it's to replace stuff that is worn out and broken.
Yeah, makes sense. So what goes into the design process? Because you don't make the same church twice. And it's got to be challenging to go, no, I've done that already. What can I change up to customize this?
Well, it's kind of like the Final Fantasy games. The games use some of the same mechanics, but there are things that are very different, both in the tone and the story. But there's a lot of similarities between them. The projects vary from year to year. I never know what I'm actually going to do until I sit down at the bricks, and until the first layout starts to come together. During that time, there is a tremendous amount of prayer that goes into what I'm doing, not just at the start, but throughout the entire process. I may have ideas and things that I want to focus on in the build. God may have other plans for me and will send me in a slightly different direction from what I originally intended. It is very rare for a project to be completed as I envisioned it originally. There are certain exceptions to that, particularly on the Season 25 build, at least on the exterior. But there were some minor changes in the interior that really kind of stand out, particularly with the placement of the baptismal font, the new organ that I built in there, the placement of certain figures. There's all kinds of those little mini details. The rebuilding of the tabernacle this year. There is always subtle changes. Some stuff can get reused. Some stuff gets modified every so often to keep things kind of updated a little bit, especially if you got new parts coming in. Lego is always releasing new stuff, and I'm always keeping my eye out on the blogs to see if there's anything I might be able to use.
Makes sense. No, I was under the assumption that you sat down and kind of rough-handed drafted out the plan for the church. No, you're freewheeling as you
I'm
go.
freehand.
So that's exactly
prayers.
the way that I write, which is why it's always phenomenally profound. And I've written 17 great American novels because I never follow my own outline.
I do blogging occasionally myself, and yeah, I'm kind of the same way. It's like I've got an idea for an article. Whether or not it finishes as planned remains to be seen, and usually 2 or 3 revisions before I really do the posting of it.
Yeah, I checked out your blog and read through a little bit prior to you coming on. What I'm really interested in is the kinds of responses that you've gotten from your ministry when you go and you do these displays and these presentations, the kind of responses you get from the people that are actually there in the congregation.
Well, for starters, the Christ the Good Shepherd parish group, they love what I do. I've been going out there for over 20 years. I started displaying with them back during season 4, and they're always excited to see what I have. They are the ones that have seen my work year after year. They kind of know that when I'm coming back, that it's going to be something beautiful. For the first time parishes, there's always this kind of surprise. The biggest surprise is when they find out that I'm not an architect and I've got cerebral palsy. The children, they see the project as something big, bright, and colorful. They're the ones that are looking inside and seeing the unique little quirks that I have in there, such as R2-D2 just hiding in plain sight, or an Optimus Prime figure that just seems kind of out of place. That is done on purpose to get their attention, to draw them inside to see what's going on. The adults love it because it's artistic. It's, once again, it's that giant creation that takes a lot of effort to do. But when they look inside, they also see some of themselves. They may remember a time when the parishes were full. I've got over 300 figures sitting inside there. In fact, I'm going to Assumption Parish in mid-November, and last year I had a kid who actually took the time, much to their parents' chagrin, to actually count all the figures that were inside at the time.
And he was the favorite child that day.
Yeah, like I said, but the parents were getting a little impatient, and that kid was just heck bent on focused on trying to get the count. And I loved it. I mean, it's because there's a lot of things. Once you build it, you tend to forget about details that you included until someone points them out to you. Uh, Particularly where I put R2D2 for the year. There was one time I'm trying to find R2D2 and I couldn't figure out where I put him, and I put him in this weird spot, and yet someone found him.
Nice.
And you know what?
Do
And
you
there are
ever
times,
use non-Lego items inside your builds?
I try and use genuine Lego bricks, although I have a few clone bricks probably mixed in from the years that I've been doing this. Those have been slowly getting phased out. I do have a couple of custom pieces that were made by another artist for me. And then I've got some stuff from Rugged Rosaries as well.
Oh, I
They
love
they,
rugged
do,
rosaries.
they donated a couple of the things that you see inside there. The one set that I do have stuff from is the Father Leopold Says Mass kit.
Oh.
I've got the books and the vestments. And what had happened with that is I had actually sent them an email asking how much it would be just to buy those, because I thought that would make a good fit. I get a message later saying your package is on its way.
Oh, wow.
And that really meant,
that's awesome.
yeah, that meant a lot to me. And I never gave them my address though. But I'm guessing because of my other hobby, amateur radio, they were able to get my call sign. And someone must have been an amateur radio operator because they knew how to look up an address, because that's just the unique nature of amateur radio. And that's something I've been doing for now since 2003.
Now, when you say amateur radio, you talking about ham radio?
Yes.
Okay.
The thing that you need a FCC
They're
license.
a dying breed of people. I actually don't know very many ham radio operators. I knew a lot when I was younger. I knew about 20 of them just in my little small town. But that's kind of faded out for the most part.
Actually,
it is a very niche community, I will say.
It is. But I think what's happening, though, at least as far as the amateur radio stuff goes, is a lot of government agencies are starting to realize that we can set up in situations most can't.
Hmm.
And we're part of a lot of disaster plans, particularly in our county and even our state. Our state EOC has a setup for amateur radio. National Weather Service in certain places have a setup for it. When there's a severe weather in our county, we're usually the ones that are reporting on the information to National Weather Service.
Hmm.
And we also cover a lot of different events. We haven't necessarily been needed yet in a major capacity, but there have been times where we've come close.
Okay.
And you're talking about the beginning of having a role to play. A lot of what I do is kind of in that same vein. There is no unimportant job when you're doing amateur radio. There's no unimportant job. You may be sitting out in the field directing traffic, but you're still doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of roles for us to play in the church. It may seem minor in the grand scheme of things, but in reality, it all has an important component of what we're doing. For me, in addition to doing the project, I also do part of the parish choir. So I do stuff with that. I do stuff with the writings. I bring up issues with disability. So I'm wearing a lot of different hats, but all for the same goal of sharing the faith using my talents.
So what's your end goal? What's your end goal with your ministry? Because I could look, I ask this because when I'm listening to you describe everything, I'm like, why isn't this guy just touring all the way down to like my neck of the woods? Because I know you would be a hit at my parish, and I'm down here in South Carolina.
Well, to answer part of that question is part of the challenge that I have with the project. There are two main challenges with what I'm doing. Number one, I have the build. I'm testing the limits of the Legos. I'm praying at the bricks for all the issues that are going on, praying with my hands. And I'm also throwing all my anxieties as well. Lego sometimes do not want to play nice, especially when you're building, doing construction that big. And I certainly can give you horror stories on that. But also, too, the challenge with the displays is because I do not drive. That means that if a parish wants to have me come out, they would have to provide the accommodations or transportation. I have done overnight displays before. A couple years ago, I went up to Harrison in Gladwin, Michigan, which is about an hour from me. Beautiful time. I loved going out there. I've also been to other parishes where I'm there for just an afternoon. If a parish can provide me the transportation for me and the project, I will go where the Lord is willing to send me. Especially since I don't do this for money. This is not why I do this. I do accept donations, obviously, to help defer some of the costs, but that's not my primary goal. My goal is to share my talents, to share my passion for the faith, and to give hope and encouragement. Years ago, during one of my displays, a grandmother brought her grandson over. He's got cerebral palsy. She was worried about his future. She told me that afternoon that I had given them hope. That's the kind of stuff that I do this for. I've run into people that have having very bad days. They get to sit and talk with me about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And when they leave, they feel a little lighter. They feel like some of their prayers have been answered. So there's a lot that goes on into this. And I would love to do a full run of displays wherever the Lord is willing to send me. I'm not sure I would have an end game per se, but because I will do this for as long as the Lord allows me. As long as I'm doing this for the right reasons. As long as I'm doing this, sharing the passion of the faith, sharing my talents. So long as I'm in service to Christ, that is all that matters to me.
I can dig that. That's one of the things, and I know I pick on him a lot on this show, but that's one of the things that I like about Ed with all the ministry that he does in his parish. Well, excuse me, parishes, because one, he's bi-ritual. He's Byzantine Catholic, but he also attends Latin Rite churches as well.
Yeah.
And he does so much for all these different ministries, and he does it selflessly. And that's what I'm seeing mirrored in what you're doing as well.
I appreciate that. And John, I got some questions though, because I keep thinking back to the fact that you break these things down at the end, and I just, man, I don't know how you're able to do that. It would be like, I don't know, it'd be like losing a child or something. I don't know.
It is very difficult. Well, let me just give you the rundown of how this teardown process goes.
Yeah.
I will usually get the project back from my home parish, and usually that afternoon I begin the process of tearing things apart. I save what I need to save so I can either reuse it or repurpose it later. But then I start breaking down the bricks, start breaking down the flooring. Let me just say that the hardest part has to be the tile work.
Yeah.
Because I'm using a paint scraper, literally, to lift up about 5 1x1 rounds at a time. And let's just say my fingers will hurt. It will take about 2 or 3 days after the project is done, torn down, which itself takes 2 or 3 days, for my fingers to start feeling somewhat normal. But you know what, though? There's always that expectation, though. There's always that kind of that hint of excitement, because I know that at some point I'm going to be starting the next build. I know at some point the Lord is going to send me on a path that I would least expect.
Yeah.
And I've really been blessed over the last 25 years of visiting some amazing parishes. And I'm always praying for new opportunities to develop. I always have a few parishes in mind that I would love to visit if the opportunity presented itself. But I also keep an open mind that may not be where the Lord wants me to go for that year.
Yeah. And another thing that you spoke about, which really caught my attention, and it has to do with me being Byzantine Catholic, actually, is that you said while you're working on these projects, there's prayer involved. And I love that because, I actually dabble a little bit in writing icons, which is something we Eastern Catholics do. And part of the process of writing an icon is that you pray and you fast. So I see what you do as art as well. So I think that's really awesome that you do that. That's part of your process is praying over it.
I am praying with my hands. My work is a prayer.
Absolutely.
A prayer for those who are struggling in the faith due to various challenges, and that doesn't matter what those challenges are.
Mm.
It is a prayer that our parishes would be full of people once again. That's why I have all the figures in there.
Nice.
So I'm also usually praying for whatever's going on around me, but as I'm building, I am praying. I'm pouring all of that into what I do. And that's part of the reason why my Substack is called Praying at the Bricks, because that's literally what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the reason why I call it Lego Church Project is because it's ongoing.
Sure.
It is a project. It's something that is going on continuously from season to season. And that's why I've been able to build in the course of doing this 25 years, 25 different churches I have built, each one with their own unique quirk, challenge, story, near disasters. Oh,
Sure.
the stories I could tell you on that.
Have you ever been approached by any of these churches or any local parishes that say, "Hey, would you put together a replica of our church?"
Ages ago, we used to have a museum, a Catholic Heritage Museum, and they had asked me to do they were considering having me do a replica of the original St. Andrew's Parish, which was a very simple building.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, sometimes things just don't always work out as we plan. They had to move the museum at one point, and I don't even know if it's still open or not.
Mm-hmm.
I know they had some problems a while back, but not really. Most of the people that know me know that I prefer to do my own designs because it's just easier that way.
Yeah.
Trying to replicate something out of Lego is a challenge in itself, especially when you're trying to do it for the scale that I do things.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a much more permanent location, if I was doing this as an extra for the project after I finished my main build, come out to a location for a couple of days a week and work on it for a bit, then yeah, I could probably do something a little bit more long term. But for something for the scale of what I'm doing on the limitations that I have, it's a little more challenging than what my abilities are. And some would consider me a Lego master. I'm much more humble about things than that.
Nice.
Yeah, the thought of spending 9 months, 10 months building one of these giant Lego churches only to be like, all right, time to start taking it apart. I'm buying new Legos at this point. I'm going to have my entire living room is going to be filled with Lego churches.
My entire living room is full of parts as well. And believe it or not, here's what's going to surprise you. Most of my builds take me under 2 months.
Huh. Interesting.
Season 25 probably took me a little bit longer by about 2 weeks than season 24 did. And that one was about 30 days. Not a record by any stretch of the imagination, but and a lot of that kind of depends on what am I trying to do for the year? How many orders to Bricklink did I put in? How smooth is the build going? And do I have anything else going on that requires my attention more than the build? Because I can spend as little 2 hours on it. I can spend as much as 8 hours if I wanted to. And
it just kind of depends on if you get in the zone or not, right?
Yeah, well, it also depends on how smoothly things are going. There are two very, very difficult sections that tend to take a bit more time. And if you notice inside the photos, there are lights in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using 2 100 count strand of lights that I have to rig. The first challenge is rigging the lower half because that is in a U shape. That follows the balcony for the projects that I've been doing for the last several seasons. The second part is where I'm tying everything together with the roof grid, then getting everything ready for the lights and getting those set, connecting the two sections together, putting in the last couple rows, and then trying to gently set in the giant roof cross, which is a challenge itself because you also have to build the base underneath it so it's got something to support. Once it gets put into place, it does not come down until teardown.
Understandable.
Yeah. Now, I'm kind of interested in some of the horror stories, but almost not much because, look, I have my youngest son is 9, and for the most of his life, he's loved Lego, and we always end up getting nothing crazy. I'm not spending the $500-600 on some of these Lego kits. I'm not doing that. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not doing it. But we get a good deal on some of these things. And he loves superheroes, so it's like, you know, the giant Iron Man, Hulk Buster suit, all these different things. We're like, okay, cool. I'll sit down with him on Christmas morning or on his birthday, and we'll build them together with him, right? Going through all the things, and then by the time I'm halfway through with it, and my fingers, I've got onset carpal tunnel from a lot of manual labor over my life. And so my hands started to cramp up, and then I break it and it comes apart. I'm like, son, I'm going to need about 45 minutes to walk away from this thing because it's absolutely devastating when you get it so far and then it comes apart.
Okay, let me go into the memory here, and I'll tell you a couple interesting chaos stories.
Look at that. It was so bad he stored it away in the archive, so it's not always fresh.
Okay, case in point, season 6. This is one of my favorite ones, actually. This was my last formal attempt at a dome roof. Because if you notice, up to about season 5, season 6, I started slowly moving away from the giant dome roofs. There's a reason for that. As you are building upward, trying to create a dome, even with bracing for lights, there's a rotation that is going on. That rotation reached to a point where the left side and the right side were off by about a ½ inch. There was no way I could line that up properly, and if every time I tried, that ended up causing the rest of the roof line to crack. So no matter what I did, I could not get it to line up, stay straight, whatever. Okay, reach the road where things started to remain relatively stable, chop it off, put a plate in. Simple. In season 8, I tried to do another dome roof, and I ended up running out of parts. So that's what prompted the flat roof. And then there was the one year, I'm trying to remember what season that was. Was that season 16? Yeah, that was season 16. I'm working on this entire section. I get the entire thing up to roof line, and there is an odd discrepancy. There's like an unevenness on the one line. And I'm trying to figure out, what did I do wrong here? So I tore the section apart, got it all the way down, and I realized that one of the columns had lifted up and was sitting on one of the floor plates, throwing it off by a third, which I didn't notice until farther up the line when it became much more pronounced. So I had to do some redesigning on that one as well. It's like, oh, geez. And then, of course, there was the mishap with season 25. Another funny one. I've got the first half of the project supposedly finished. There is a pattern to the windows. Yeah, except for the fact that I messed up the pattern. I ended up having to tear things apart and swapping the pieces out. So there are minor little disasters.
Collapses. No collapses.
Well, there was one time during season 20, it was coming back from the parish, and somehow they managed to smash the bell tower. But that may have been part of the design error on my part and how I built it. So 20 minutes later, I had it fixed. But I also haven't been back out to that parish ever since. So I will not name the
break my
parish.
stuff. I'm not coming back.
Well, no, they didn't. They wouldn't invite me back out. That was nothing on my end. If they were to call me up tomorrow and invite me out for a function, I'd still go out there.
Nice. So we got about 15 minutes left in the show. I know Ed's probably got some more questions, but I've only got one left. And it's probably the important question of the show. When you start these projects, when you do these presentations, when you travel to these parishes, and when you do these shows like you're doing now, what do you want the people who see, the people who come and watch your presentations, the people who look at your work, the people who listen to you on these shows, what do you want them to walk away with?
What I want them to walk away with is to learn about what I'm doing so that they can may be inspired to explore their own talents, that they may be able to find a way to use their abilities, even if they may not necessarily think they have anything of value, to use it to share the faith. The other thing is to give hope and encouragement to those who may be facing challenges or disabilities, stuff that we may never fully know or understand, and to still know that God can still utilize your abilities. Even if you don't feel like you have anything to offer, God will still be there for you, and he will show you the way, even if you do not see it. So it is a goal to give encouragement, to give hope, and to remind people that many of us face struggles in our lives that most will never know. But God knows, and he's with us always, no matter what storms we face.
Beautifully said.
Absolutely, yeah. I got, I'm curious though, John. And you told us how the idea came about. You tell us why you do what you do and things like that. But I mean, the one thing that I'm curious about, like, why Legos? Like 20 some odd years ago, how did that come into your mind that I want to do this with Legos?
Well, you have to figure, at the time I was growing up, I lived in the original parish rectory for a couple of years for Christ the Good Shepherd, which is literally like half a block from the church. Mm-hmm. And my parents were active in ministry at the church. My dad was a lector. I was doing altar serving, and then eventually also was doing choir. So I'm a kid. My friends are building these elaborate spaceships, and I just can't do it to save my hide. So I build these rudimentary buildings, and I am turning them into churches because that's what I know. That's what I believe. Cool. That's the message that was growing up constantly. What turned it from a childhood fantasy to this ministry was when I started doing the public displays. Mm-hmm. I started doing one at the place we were attending in Flushing at the time. And then eventually I started doing the Advent display at our Christ the Good Shepherd. We were known as St. Helens Parish back then. And that's when I also started doing the first print interviews. I did an interview for Saginaw News, and I started doing more and more stuff. With the development of podcasts, I started doing more of those, and things just kind of go off into an interesting direction where people feel that I have great wisdom and interesting things to talk about, interesting things to say, and I'm always thankful for those opportunities. I'm just the humble builder. The Lord is the one that is allowing me to share this story.
Nice. And as far as putting them on display, was that something that came to you? You decided I want to display this, or did someone come to you and say, these creations you're making are incredible, somebody else needs to see these, a larger audience needs to see these?
I think it was a combination of both. I think I wanted to do something more with it, but an opportunity presented itself and I took it. The Christ the Good Shepherd one was my idea. I called the parish to see if they might be interested. Wasn't sure if it was going to happen. A couple weeks later, I called back with a follow-up and said yes, and we want you there for Christmas. And then I did two displays that year. I was at the Cavalry Carriage Museum with season 4, and then that was when the first Saginaw News article came out. And it came out the day that I was there for the display, and I went to Mass that night. And the priest at the time, Father Emmett Merceau, he recognized me from the photo and said, looking forward to see you next week with the church. Uh-huh. And that's where things really took off. That's when I started doing the Advent display. And even during COVID, that was the only display I did that year, mm-hmm. because everything was shut down, and we had just changed priests. But he felt that it was important that I could do the display. to give some kind of normalcy to what was going on, because it was a very chaotic time. And I'm always thankful when parishes reach out to me, when they invite me to come out, and most of them will understand about my transportation issues. So the parishes that I'm going to are the ones that truly want to have me out, because they understand what's entailed. And if anyone was to ever have any questions, they can easily contact me, and I can give them more details about what I would need. My requirements are actually kind of small.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider, and this just popped into my head, would you ever consider as an option, obviously, it would be something that you actually got paid for. When I say paid for, it's probably in the form of a donation. But there are a lot of beautiful Catholic churches out there. I can only imagine what a great idea it would be. Like, I would buy this for my priest to have in the rectory, a scale replica of our parish built by you as a gift to him.
I think something could be done, but it would have to require a lot of research. And you also have to figure
I get that. You would need a lot of information. You would need pictures, measurements.
Yeah.
You would actually need almost the building's blueprints to be able to scale it.
I don't know. You know what? It's something that I'm always praying for opportunities, praying for where the Lord is willing to lead me. And sometimes a path opens up that I would not expect. So that's where I keep things at. I'm not exactly good at replicas myself. The only time I ever tried to do any kind of real replica was the placement of the altar. I'm trying to think, was that season 15? Yeah, I think that was season 15. Because St. Helens has an interesting layout at the moment. Although at the time my views were a lot more about church layouts, are a lot different than what they are now. I tend to lean more towards a traditional look than anything else, but that's just my personal preference. But when I was younger, I grew up in at St. Helens, loved the design of it, but you have to figure there was a lot of recavation that took place. And sometimes you have to question the decisions that were made. And I, for one, would like to see a slight return to the beauty of the church, personally.
Oh, absolutely.
So
the parish house that holds the offices for the people that work at our parish was the original parish, but it's from the 70s. It is round. It looks like a spaceship house. It's very not great. But across the grass mound from it, we have the beautiful church, that was, the building that we finally had built. But we have a very traditional floor plan with that. You walk into the narthex, you've got another set of double doors, and then the interior is in the shape of a cross, where it comes down this way. You've got the transept over here, the transept over there, the sanctuary in the center with the high altar behind it. So it's very much like what you would see in a traditional European Catholic church. But I've seen some that they're, old Pizza Hut buildings. So I'm definitely with you on the return to the aesthetics of the Catholic Church.
Well, I think also too that there's always a room for a blended modern take, but with a more traditional mindset. And that's certainly something that I try and bring across in mine. If you were to look at the upper balcony, you'd see the fancy high-tech organ, but you'd also see a person in a wheelchair as well. Because that particular parish decided to include an elevator hidden in one of the bell towers. So nice. there's always that kind of thing. And I try and include as much representation and disability in my project. I've got service dogs. I've got people with wheelchairs. There may be a child in there that has autism. You never know. And when you go to a church, you may never know what someone's truly facing with. There have been times where I've come to mass with severe anxiety attacks, and the only person that knew it was one of my friends in the choir. You learn to adapt, you learn to overcome, and you learn to navigate the challenges that you have, so you can try and function.
And then I like the aspect also of you take the challenges that you have and you turn them into features, not bugs.
It's not always easy. There are times
I get it. I know it's not always easy.
when I'm fighting myself, but you know what though? The reward that I get from doing all this, from going through all the challenges, is the ability to share my talents and my mission with others. So long as I am in service to Christ, as long as I put that forward, as long as I make that the priority, everything else is a blessing.
The only other thing that came to my mind was that when you get to the end of the season at that last church, I was having this idea of maybe as a fundraising event, you auction off that church instead of dismantling it. I don't know if you've ever considered that.
It would require about $20,000 worth of parts to build another season.
Oh, okay. Well, forget that.
However, though, what I have thought about doing, though, is possibly during one of my displays do a food drive.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that would be great.
And I may actually bring that idea up to our new priest this year for celebrating 25 years and try and get a food drive going. Because that's one of the other things I want to help out with. This is not about myself. This is about how can I use my platform to help those who are struggling.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, John, thanks for coming on the show, man. And I know I pinged you at really short notice, but I was like, the schedule looks right. Like Ed doesn't even know this, but I pinged John in a message about 10:55. So an hour before we sat down to record. I was like, hey, you good? He's like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
It's
great.
So funny.
I'll send you a link in 45 minutes.
Yeah, what's so funny about that, though, is that last Thursday, I went on Father Edward Looney's program, and he had messaged me that morning, and I recorded later on the afternoon. So this idea of doing the spur of the moment, this is not a new idea, and I've got no problem.
Oh, perfect. Well, it's great because Ed and I never have anything planned anyway, unless we have a specific date that works for someone. We just jump on and start talking because these organic conversations are usually the best.
Absolutely.
But again, thank you so much for coming on. It's awesome what you do. I'll be sure to tag you when we post the streaming for the show, get more people looking at your work. And if people are up there in the Michigan area and you want to host Mr. John Kramer and the Lego Church Project at your parish, his information is right there on his Twitter profile, which will also be included in the show notes here. And it takes you straight to his Facebook page, which is the Lego Church Project. And you can find more about him and what he does there. But we're going to wrap this episode up. Ed's not going to bring anything out of his basement, but who knows? Maybe in the future he'll have one of your season works in his basement. And it'll be a struggle for him to get it up and down the stairs eventually. But we're out of time. So I want to thank you again, John, for coming on. All the viewers, listeners, subscribers, thanks for watching, liking, sharing, subscribing, and most of all, thank you for shoving this pro-Catholic content into the face of all your anti-Catholic friends. All right. Thanks for watching. You guys take care, and that'll do it. We will see you tomorrow.
God bless everybody.
Thank you.